Did you know that April the 24th is designated as National Pigs in a Blanket Day? I didn't either. And I'm going to share with you a pigs in a blanket recipe, not so much because it's pigs in a blanket day, but because this is such a fun, easy recipe. And it starts with a dough that I've been making for years that I got from my best friend in Denmark. I am not even going to attempt to pronounce the name of this roll.
Fastelavnsboller.
But it is the dough that I use all the time. So this is the bread that she shared with me. So this bread, if you are Danish and you want to write phonetically how I should say this in the comments, I would appreciate it.
Fastelavnsboller.
But in any case, this is a Lenten bread that's filled with custard, and they use it, or they make it right before Lent, so they're using up all the stuff you're not supposed to eat during Lent, the butter, the sugar, the eggs. But I have found it to be one of my favorite all-purpose doughs. I use the same recipe that I'm showing you now. I use it and stuff it with pepperoni and meat for the Italian stromboli, and I'll use it for this. I use it for all sorts of things, and I just make slight variations based on what I'm putting in it, but it's super simple, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to show you how I use it today, and hope that you try it. If you like this recipe and you try it, please leave me a comment and let me know how it goes. And definitely click the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's get started. First, I do want to say that this recipe and almost every recipe that I'm going to share that makes bread or some kind of dough, I use a kitchen scale, and that is because weighing ingredients is much more precise, and I do that for things like making homemade pasta and making bread. If you don't have a scale, I cannot extol the virtues of a scale enough, and I will leave a link down below to the one that I use the most. I have 3, but this is the one I use all the time. So we are going to measure some ingredients, or weigh some ingredients. But before I do that, I am going to get the milk and the butter going on the stove because it needs to be melted. And all of the ingredient lists and proportions are going to be in a recipe in the description below. But I have a stick of butter, which is about 113 grams, and then I'm going to, the milliliters is on the wrong side for me, I'm going to put 250 milliliters of milk in with that butter, and then just set that on the stove to melt. So I just have that on low heat so the butter will melt into the warm milk, and I'm going to do the rest of the ingredients. As I said, I use a scale, so I'm just going to tear out that bowl, and then what I'm going to put into this bowl is 13 grams of dry active yeast and 20 grams of sugar. So I use 20 grams of sugar when I'm doing a savory version of this dough. For the sweet Danish bread, this one that I'm not going to say, that uses 40 grams of sugar. So that's my 13 grams of dry active yeast, 20 grams of sugar, and then I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of salt. This is a half teaspoon, that's why I'm doing 2. And 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Okay, and also already weighed and measured is 450 grams of all-purpose flour. Now I did measure that with a spoon just so I could give you an approximation if you don't have a scale, and it's about 3 generous cups of flour. I've seen full-size hot dogs, and I've also seen little hot dogs, like mini hot dogs, and so that's what I got today. I picked these up at Whole Foods. I like it because they are pasture-raised, organic, non-GMO, and they don't have any added nitrites or nitrates. It is a Little Goodies brand, and as I said, I got it at Whole Foods. They're fully cooked, so really the only thing you're doing when you wrap them in the dough is baking it so that the dough is fully cooked. Okay, so that butter and the milk is nice and warm and steaming on the sides. I'm just going to pour that into my big mixing bowl. And then I'm going to add in the yeast, the sugar, the salt, and the baking powder that I put in here. And you're just going to lightly float that on top. And we're going to let that bloom for about 15 minutes. Okay, so our milk and melted butter have been in this bowl with the yeast sprinkled on top, and I've let it bloom for 15 minutes. I think you can see how nice and foamy that is. So 2 more things and then our dough is ready to rise. I have 1 egg and 450 grams of all-purpose flour, which, as I said, for volume measurement is a little bit more than 3 cups. So I'm just going to take a wooden spoon or a spatula and kind of mix that together. Break up that egg yolk, make sure it's nice and incorporated. Okay, so I think you can see that that is sort of a wet dough, and everything is nicely mixed in. I have no pockets of flour or baking powder or anything like that. And now I'm just going to let that rise for 40 minutes, and then we'll come back, we'll roll the dough out and assemble our pigs in a blanket. So I'm just going to cover this up and let it sit for 40 minutes. So the dough has been rising for about 40 minutes, and you will see that it is about double the size that it was when I put it in there. And as I said, I love this dough. It's the most forgiving dough. And we are going to lightly flour a clean countertop and just turn that dough out. It's pretty soft, which just means it's going to be super pillowy when it is part of the recipe. So I'm just going to flour that on the top and use a rolling pin. So I've never actually done this for a pigs in a blanket recipe. Lots of other recipes, but not this one. So I'm not exactly sure how many we're going to get out of this, but we will see. Okay, so once you have that all rolled out, you're just going to cut into pieces that you're going to wrap around these little hot dogs. So I'm just going to eyeball it. And then I just have a baking sheet with a silicone mat on it. Wrap it around. So we're just going to wrap this dough around these little mini hot dogs, and then we're going to brush it with egg and let it rise for 20 minutes or so. That's actually just the perfect amount of time to preheat the oven. And these are going to be preheated at 395 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so I have 1 egg that I have put in this bowl. I'm just going to beat that up. I'm just going to take a little silicone brush. I'm going to brush it on these little pigs in a blanket. Okay, so those are wrapped, and I'm just going to let them rise for 20 minutes while the oven preheats. And I have just a few more, so I'm going to do the remainder of those, and then I'll use the rest of the dough for something else. Let's see, I'm going to pick this dough up, flour it, and then I'm just going to re-roll it a little bit thicker. So this is not my croissant dough, but with this extra, I'm going to make something that is similar to that with this dough, the same dough, and a little bit of jam. This is just a strawberry jam that I have in my fridge. I try not to waste any ingredients, so if I have leftovers, I always have to pivot and do a little kitchen improv. So these are a jam-filled roll that's using the dough that I made up for the pigs in a blanket recipe that this video is actually about. So now, front and center, I have the last of the pigs in a blanket and then these extra little jam-filled rolls. Again, I'm going to brush that with the beaten egg and let that rise for 20 minutes while the oven preheats. Okay, so our pigs in a blanket are nicely puffed and the hot dogs should be warmed all the way through. I'm just going to move them from this hot tray to a serving platter. So I'd love to hear in the comments below, what do you eat your hot dogs with, or these little mini pigs in a blanket? As for me, I am an equal opportunity condiment eater, so I'm going to serve these with some organic ketchup and then 2 different mustards. I actually got both of these at the Quail and Olive. This is a tequila jalapeno. It's sort of a little bit sweet and spicy. And then this is a traditional extra strong Dijon mustard that I really like. These are all ready to go. Our easy pigs in a blanket for National Pigs in a Blanket Day, which is April the 24th. If you are going to make some pigs in a blanket and use this recipe, please leave a comment below or a picture. I'd love to see how it goes. I hope this inspires you to get into the kitchen, use what you have, and make a delicious mess. Now you get to dig in.